Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's NSA Connect session. NSA Connects with Stuttering and Mental Health, Building Resilience and Well-Being. We have a wonderful facilitator this evening who's going to introduce herself in just a moment, but I would just like to go over really quick our ground rules for this evening. First of all, let me just introduce myself. I'm Pamela Mertz. I am a member of the NSA, and I'm the programming coordinator. So I help bring all these wonderful sessions to everyone, and we're really delighted to have a really great session on tap tonight. As I'm sure you're all aware, we ask that people keep their microphones on mute until it's time for you to share some feedback or ask a question. Our facilitator will let you know during her session when questions or feedback are welcome. You can ask a question one of two ways. You can raise your hand the traditional way by actually physically raising your hand, or you can use the icon down on the toolbar where it says raise hand. Just hit on that and you'll see that the raise hand is there. And then you'll also get a prompt to be able to lower your hand as well. This session is being recorded for later viewing, and we like to be able to make our sessions available on YouTube for those that were not able to attend tonight. So with all of that said and done, I would like to introduce tonight's facilitator, and she can introduce herself. But Lindsay Liben is a licensed clinical social worker, and I hope that she's excited as I am and we are to have her presenting tonight. So Lindsay, welcome and take it away.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. I'm really excited about not only this topic, but connecting with the NSA. Pam, thank you for having me, and Tammy and Annabelle, who I just met earlier. I think this is going to be a wonderful presentation. Hopefully, you guys will learn a little bit and have a little bit of fun, and then we're going to have a discussion towards the end. Just to share a little bit about myself, as Pam told you, that I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I'm a psychotherapist. And I really specialize in treating anxiety, depression, burnout, overwhelm, a lot of perfectionism I've been seeing lately, but really with a focus on positive psychology. And that's what we're going to be talking a lot today. And this is really the scientific study of how people flourish. All right, okay, so I really do feel very privileged to be here today because not only do I find this work deeply personal and meaningful, but my husband, his name is Michael, some of you might know him, he's a person who stutters, and he is one of the most compassionate and optimistic and resilient people that I know. And I would say that these qualities are not in spite of his stutter, but likely because of it. Many of you have maybe also developed similar strengths through your own experiences, navigating all different types of challenges. And if that's not how you feel right now, I do want to tell you that there's good news, that the qualities of compassion and optimism and resilience are all skills. So that means that you can either strengthen what you already have, or you can almost work it like a muscle and build it. So then when you are confronted with greater challenges, you have some tools in your toolbox when the road gets a little bit bumpy. Um, I just wanted to share, as I mentioned, I have my own therapy practice, and I've been noticing during a lot of my intake calls, people keep talking about how they are just sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. They have been letting anxiety and depression just steal their joy, but they don't know what to do about it. And that's when I find the lessons of positive psychology are so valuable. Because I think like that resonates with so many people. And even just, I don't know if you want to click a hand, but like if that resonates with you, if you've ever felt that way, like this feeling like you don't want to be exactly where you are from an emotional standpoint, but not exactly having a robust toolbox to deal with it. Does that sound familiar?
Oh, yeah.
I think I see a couple of hands popping up. Well, if that resonates, then you are definitely in the right place because today we're going to talk about moving from friction to flow. And it's not about removing the obstacles, it's about building the capacity to navigate the hard stuff with more resilience. Okay. Okay. So where do we begin? So through my research and the clinical experience, here's what it comes down to. One of the best ways of navigating these friction points is really just about creating an emotional currency bank. Now, what does that mean? You can think of it like this. Every time you experience joy or connection or self-compassion, consider that a deposit. And then every time you have a difficult moment or bumpiness along the road, that's a withdrawal. And the goal is not to avoid the withdrawals. I mean, because that's part of life, right? That's going to happen. It's just making sure that you're not running on empty when they do pop up. So I want to introduce you to the insights and the techniques that are going to help you build up those reserves. So the next time you do hit a bumpy patch, you've got the resilience to ride it out. Okay, but before we talk about how to make these deposits, we need to talk about the fundamentals of how happiness actually works. Okay, so what I'm going to introduce you to is this idea of a happiness set point. And this is the theory that basically all of your emotions exist along a spectrum and you have an emotional home base. And this is basically your level of contentment where you're naturally going to return after the like major life event starts to fade a little bit. So think about it like if you get a promotion at work or if you experience like a really embarrassing block or you get a new car or you have a kid, you'll eventually drift back to this basic level of happiness. It's your home base. And if you want to know why this happens, like why do you feel so happy when you first get a really positive experience and then it abates a lot, I think first we need to acknowledge that pleasure is fleeting, right? Like humans are designed with a negativity bias. And part of it is a survival mechanism, right? Like you needed to know that if you ate this berry, it was going to kill you. So we've evolved to kind of perceive the world through this lens of what is dangerous, what are the threats. And pleasure is a much more fleeting emotion. Our brains get used to things really fast. Um, I always think that this is such an interesting example. It's like the first time your partner tells you that they love you, you're like flooded with happiness and like the dopamine is surging and it feels so good. But then after like months and months or years and years of being together, you start to not notice it as much. Someone's walking out the door, it's like, hey, babe, I love you, right? And it's like, it's not because it stops mattering. It's just because our brain adapts. And the scientists call this effect a hedonic treadmill. And I think this is the perfect name. And basically, it's like if you picture you're running on a treadmill and you're sort of chasing this elusive happiness, you look around, you're putting in all this effort, and you are standing in the same emotional spot. So, where does that leave us? There's a psychologist, her name is Sonia Lubinersky, and she does this amazing research on how to amplify your happiness. And basically, this is the pie graph that she came up with. 50% of your happiness set point comes from your genes. So this is what you're genetically predisposed to have. It's like any other genes, your height, your eye color. 10% comes from your life circumstance. This could be your job, where you live, whether you're in a relationship. But this is the best part. There is this really ripe 40% that is shaped by what you intentionally do. And this has to do with how you think. And it means that happiness is not just luck, it means you really have the power to change it. Okay. So before we talk about how you're going to tap into that 40%, I just want to pump the brakes really quick for 1 second because I find a lot of my patients, and this just feels just generally resonant, people are always trying to optimize their happiness in life, but a lot of the times they're running on empty. And you may have seen this is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you've ever taken like a Psych 101 class, this is one of the first things that comes up. But basically, it's the idea that human needs exist in layers. And the base of this pyramid is your basic needs. So this is food, sleep, stability. And if those needs, if these lower level needs are not met, your nervous system is going to prioritize them over everything else, including love, including belonging. So if you think about it, when you're exhausted, or maybe you are hangry, or if you are having just overwhelming stress at home, you need to attend to those needs before you can focus on being self-actualized. I love the metaphor where it's like when your phone is at 5% and you think to yourself like, "Oh, I can definitely stream this movie right now." And it's like, "No, you can't. Your phone is completely going to conk out." And that's the same with the human needs. Um, so I like this as an illustration because it tells us that when you're feeling stuck, the question isn't what's wrong with me. The question is which need needs attention first. And that's where we're going to start. We're going to stabilize the foundation and then we're going to build up. And one of the best ways to stabilize this foundation is with your breath. And before I go into our next strategy, which is going to be about relaxation breathing, I just want to check in if anybody has any questions about the beginning part. You can either just pop them into the chat, or you can raise your hand and or Pam can let me know. All right, so we are good to keep moving on. All right, so this is one of my favorite strategies. We are going to talk about breathing. And I know you're all thinking like, I already know how to breathe, but you got to hear me out because this is a special kind. This is a very formal relaxation breathing. And I love this because it's sort of like a superpower. You have it available to you all the time. It doesn't require an app. It doesn't cost any money. And you can really use it when you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed. I want to start by sort of setting the scene. Picture a time that might be stressful for you. Maybe you're in a loud restaurant with coworkers and it is your turn to order, or you're introducing yourself at a meeting. If either of these situations ever bring up tension for you, you're certainly not alone. But you might start to recognize like what is happening in your body and your physiology is starting to react. Your heart starts to maybe race, your muscles tighten, your mind might have a reaction. But this is your nervous system being hijacked. And basically it sends a surge of cortisol through your body, and that's the stress hormone. And suddenly you're in this fight or flight mode. Has anyone ever felt that? Does anyone have a familiarity ever experiencing that type of reaction? All right. So here is the really cool part. You can actually turn off this physiological reaction by activating what's called your parasympathetic nervous system. And you've obviously heard of your nervous system. That's your fight or flight. But your parasympathetic nervous system, that's what we call the rest and digest. That's the calming down feature. And basically, if you think of anxiety as like your hardwired alarm that there's a danger or a threat, we've evolved to need it. And way back at, prehistoric times, if you were being chased by a wild animal, you needed to have this physiological response. Otherwise, you would perish. And in those moments of danger, your body would physically redirect all of this energy towards your muscles to, you weren't able to breathe as effectively or as deeply. Well, now we've recognized that when you are slowly, deliberately breathing, you're consciously sending a message to your nervous system that says, I'm safe. You can chill out now. And it sends that parasympathetic nervous system into go mode. And that's your calming and your stress reduction mechanism. So your heart will start to slow, your muscles will start to relax, your brain will stop spiraling. Um, Before we dive into what this technique actually entails, I just want to give you a little bit more background. It was created by Leah Lagos, and she's a tenured professor at Rutgers University. And basically, what she figured out is that when you shift your breathing into this state, you're able to actually elicit a greater sense of flow. And I'm going to talk about flow specifically a little bit later. But what this means is like you are entering this zone of performance and confidence, and you can actually improve your functioning. So if it's okay with you, I'd love to run through a cycle of what relaxation breathing is. And I'm going to speak to all of it. It is called the 10-second breath. You're going to breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds and then actively out through your mouth, like you're blowing out a candle. I want you to really push on your diaphragm. And I want you to anchor yourself in your body. If you're noticing that your mind is wandering, just bring it back without judgment. If you are noticing what is happening in your body, I want you to absorb as much as you can through your senses. You can even like put your hand on your belly to feel it really expanding and contracting. You're going to breathe in through your nose. You'll notice your belly rise like a balloon. You're going to breathe out through your mouth. It's just really slow. It's really steady. And the longer you exhale, the more you can activate this parasympathetic nervous system and tell your body to relax. So, whenever you're ready, I'm going to give everybody a chance. You can do it with your eyes open or eyes closed. Okay. So, I want everybody to breathe in to your nose, 2, 3, 4, and out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In through your nose, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Breathe in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In through your nose, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In through your nose, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And last time, in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm curious how that felt. Does anyone want to share their experience or feel comfortable describing what that was like?
I'll I'll share, Lin Lindsay. I always This is Pam, everybody. I always seem to have a hard time with relaxation breathing because I can't seem to clear my mind. So I have a really hard time focusing on trying to quiet my mind enough to do concentrated relaxation, breathing. And just curious if like anybody else ever experiences that as well.
Yeah, I'll go. I felt like it was extremely relaxing, and I felt like to me that it helped clear my head. That's just like my thoughts about the exercise. That's about it.
And thank you for sharing. And I also just want to mention, so Pam, what's so interesting that was your experience is that it is definitely a skill and a muscle in the sense where it's the more you practice and the more you're able to do it, the more effective it will be. So I certainly want to address that piece as well. But this sort of when we talk about mindfulness and really putting and anchoring yourself in your body, kind of clearing your mind a little bit, it's about just continually bringing it back without judgment. If your mind wanders, that's okay, right? Like you don't have to be the perfectionist within doing this. And I think like it is really this ability to just kind of sit quietly without letting, your thoughts enter this like cerebral, almost like existential space that you don't need to perseverate on what was happening before you started or worry about where you're going. If you can just anchor yourself in the present moment, it then creates a little bit of a buffer, right? Like we're going from this fight or flight mode on one end of the spectrum and just a little bit more into the central mode of observation. And when you have that buffer, you can then make decisions that maybe feel less reactive or less automatic and more rooted in, okay, well, what choice do I feel? What are the options that are available? And then what do I choose? Um, so it can help give a little bit more agency back too.
So like from what you were saying about the 10-second breath, for me, I also have struggles with just relaxing because I'm thinking about so many things. But I think something that I've learned is like no longer trying to fight those thoughts and just like allow them to be there because then they'll leave and then you'll actually have that moment to just take that breath because I think that that we think when we're like trying to like meditate or just trying to take a break that we're not supposed to have thoughts, but we're human. Our thoughts are like everywhere. So I'm trying to not fight them so that they can just be there. I can say, okay, I'm having those thoughts, and then possibly because I am acknowledging it, they'll go away and then I can actually focus.
I love that. And you said that beautifully. I agree. And I think like that is such an important part because it's like when we are fighting with something, if you think of like feelings or thoughts sometimes like a hydraulic, the more you push it down, it's inevitably going to pop up in some other place. But if you can just exist with it, and that's again, it's like this idea of like just observing them, just observing them that they're here, and I think it's like almost taking I was gonna say like taking the power back from the thoughts, right? Like it's just being able to have a little bit more equilibrium. They're existing and also, you get to kind of be present with yourself. I love that idea, not fighting with them. It's just they exist, they're thoughts.
Mm. Lindsay, Joel made an interesting comment in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see that or not.
Okay, so is it okay, Joel, if I read it out loud? So one recommendation for people who stutter self-disclosure. Is this the same for people who have anxiety? For example, should we just self-disclose to everyone, I have anxiety? Would that automatically reduce the anxiety? Well, first of all, it's so brave and beautiful. I think certainly it depends on the individual and their comfortability level, but you're spot on with this ability to say like, what is the intention of concealing something? And then being able to just sort of like find emotional equilibrium around it. Because I think so much of the times, like we work really hard to kind of keep things a secret. And as we say in therapy, it's like secrets sometimes create sickness. And ultimately, when you can feel the feelings, you know, having anxiety or having depression or having any form of adversity, like it's part of the human condition. We're hardwired to have a lot of these feelings or a lot of these experiences. And so instead of trying to distance ourselves from them, if we can integrate into either someone's identity or experience, all of a sudden you get to live a life with a lot more authenticity.
Thank you.
No, thank you for bringing that up. That was great. I'd love to take either any more questions about breathing or we can jump forward to the roots to happiness. All right. So shifting a little bit forward, now that we've talked about stabilizing the base of the foundation and really regulating the nervous system, I want to zoom out a little bit more about the bigger picture. And this is the idea of building joy in your life. And remember that happiness is not just one thing. It really shows up through three specific pathways, and each one supports well-being in a unique way. So, the three pathways, the first is about feeling good. That is actively seeking pleasure and joy in your life. The second is engaging fully, and that's the idea of flow. That is just, getting lost in time and total absorption in the things that you love. And the third is about doing good. So, finding meaning and finding contribution in something beyond the self. And quite honestly, that's where I think the NSA is so amazing because it brings us together. It allows for this connection and people having a shared experience. And it's very cool that when you take these three different pathways and you weave them together, your happiness becomes much more stable, much more consistent, and maybe a little bit more predictable. So I think it's also worth examining that happiness is never the destination. It's not like, you're going to cross the finish line and suddenly happiness is waiting for you, but it is about creating these optimal conditions where it can show up more often and then stick around a little bit longer. And so what I'd love to do next is break down each of these different three pathways. All right, so the first is about feeling good. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about like binging a show on Netflix or having a pint of ice cream, even though those things can absolutely be nice too. I'm really talking about consciously noticing and cultivating positive emotions like calmness or joy or pride or contentment, and then savoring it so it lasts a little bit longer. So, one of the simplest and most powerful things that you can do to cultivate that is through the idea of gratitude. And I'm talking about intentionally pausing and noticing what's going well in your life. I mean, it could be something as small as like a really good cup of coffee or a quiet moment of reflection. Or if you live in New York, it's that beautiful moment when everything's covered in beautiful white snow right before it turns into a giant slush pile on your corner. But it's really this idea that you can't control that there's going to be the cup of water, but you do get to control whether you see it as half empty or as half full. And really, the research shows that practicing gratitude doesn't just make you feel better in the moment, but it improves your relationships, it reduces stress, and it makes life feel a little bit more manageable. Because think about it. If you practice gratitude on a regular basis, you will find more creative problem-solving solutions. You'll be able to handle challenges a little bit better. It decreases this feeling of overwhelm. And once again, it's taking you out of this fight or flight mode and putting you into one that feels a little bit more stable and gives you a little bit more psychological flexibility. So what does that look like in practice? One of the best strategies that I always recommend is called a pleasure inventory. And basically, this is just a running list of anything that makes you feel good or lights you up. And the trick is to have this list handy, because when life gets really stressful, it's hard to remember the things that elicit joy. Humans have very faulty memories, for better or for worse. And quite honestly, you may be experiencing something that feels so overwhelmingly joyful, but 8 months later, it's going to be really hard to recall what that is. If you have a list that's readily accessible, even just keeping it in the Notes app on your phone, suddenly you can give your brain a little happiness boost on an ongoing basis. And even if it incrementally improves your situation, I think that's trending towards the direction that we're looking to gravitate towards. Next, this is just sort of a broader way of doing it. This is transforming it into a more weekly gratitude practice. So in addition to the pleasure inventory, I like to put gratitude front and center. And really how you do it is throughout the day. Just briefly notice the moments or the events that are eliciting gratitude. And it can be very brief, because this is not journaling. This is just about shifting your attention. So tracking your hobbies, tracking if there is a route that you take to work where you pass like a coffee shop that has a funny sign that makes you laugh, or texting with a friend. But you're trying to retrain your brain to see the good using what we call a positivity mental filter. Again, the goal is to not force happiness, right? It's just to start training your brain to all of these positive things that actually are around you. Again, I reference like this negativity bias that we're evolved to have, but it causes your brain to literally forget what brings you joy. So this practice will not only help you remember, but it will keep it in your active memory. So I'm curious, can anybody share something? Maybe just one piece of something that elicited joy for them, or something that they're grateful for at this time. I might see Dr. William Dunbar. Were you raising your hand? Hi.
I am raising my hand. How are you?
Oh, so good.
And it's a pleasure to be involved and then have you talk about mental status. So I'm a lifelong stutterer, and recently I just learned how to embrace it, embrace the fear, and kind of wipe that away. Easier said than done, but it takes a long time and it takes practice, because as you know, the brain habituates, and we have to continue to practice over and over again. So when I was in high school and college, I played a horn. This is going to lead to, this happiness, how we see ourselves. And I wanted to pick that up again. So all of the music came back, and I'm now engaging in just to practice, not to perform, yet if that happens, that happens. But the fact that I can remember the notes, the fact that I can work with my armature to those brass players, by the way, that's a valve trombone, and, just give myself that joy, because I've been thinking about it and now I'm actually doing it. And I'm thinking, I'm playing again. So those little things might mean, not a lot to others, but to others who are validated, or if they validated, it's great. So those little things work very, very well. And by the way, for a person with disfluency, playing an instrument gets that breath control, and you can go in and out. And afterwards, I do feel relaxed.
That's fantastic. And it's funny, one of the next things that I'm going to speak about is this entering a state of flow. But you totally brought us there, because truly one of the best ways to think about what are the activities that really cultivate that feeling of flow, it is looking back to the earlier points in life, right? Like, what are the activities when you were younger that felt effortless, that brought such a sense of joy that you could feel that total absorption, where like, all of your bodily needs just fall by the wayside, and it's just you and your activity together. And I love hearing that you picked up the horn again and being able to just not feel that there's any pressure. It needs to be bigger than it is. It's just for you. And that hearing you say that, like, it feels so satisfying. It feels like it's such an authentic gratification. That was awesome. Does anyone want to share what brings them joy or something that they have gratitude for? I think I see it's showing up as Reuter. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, yes, you are pronouncing it, it right. Um, so I I'm uh, uh, I'm feeling joy uh, at this. I mean, for this meeting, it's giving me like joy right now. So that's the thing, being in this in this call.
That's so nice to hear. And I think like that's one of the really special things about NSA Connects where we can like be in this space. And it's a safe space where we can be a little bit vulnerable and we can talk about things that we might not be able to have these conversations with, people at work or on an ongoing basis. And thank you for sharing that perspective. That means a lot. And I think it really does a lot for all of us who came out tonight. Um, so thank you. And to dive in a little bit more to really amplifying this sense of connection to ourselves and to what we're doing around us. And I love when William was telling us about playing the horn because first of all, the way that you spoke about it, you could clearly tell that this is something that does light you up. Um, and you can engage fully, and that is exactly where flow lives. So if you guys have ever experienced it, you know what I'm talking about. You know what William's talking about because it truly is the state where you're absorbed what's happening around you. You lose track of time. Hours become minutes. You're truly not even thinking about yourself and you're just completely in the moment. And that is flow. And scientifically, the research shows that people who experience it are generally more happy. And to kind of answer, like, how do you know if you're in flow? Well, a few things tend to show up. One is that you are not checking the clock. Intrusive thoughts, absolutely scale back, go by the wayside. You don't have any type of intrusion like, oh, did I forget to turn off the bathroom light? No, it's just you being present with what's happening around you. You're fully engaged. So basically, it's an activity that balances where challenge meets skill. And everything is clicking for you. Your effort and the activity are working together seamlessly. So people can really evoke this feeling through a lot of different activities. Like for William, it's definitely the horn. But it could be music, it could be exercise, it could be work, it could be, you know, anything that is unique to you. There's no hierarchy. Your flow is your flow. But what's interesting is that you cannot force flow. It's not the kind of thing where you can be like, I want to be in flow right now, and then just make it happen. But what you can do is set the stage for it. And as I was saying earlier, where challenge meets skill is when you can invite in the flow. So if you have an activity that's really boring, if you can increase the challenge, all of a sudden it can seem a little bit more engaging. It's almost like if you think of like if you're like throwing out pieces of paper that are on your desk. Well, maybe if you crumple them up and put the wastebasket across the room and see how many you can get into the wastebasket, like all of a sudden it can kind of put you into this mental state. It's like this sweet spot where you're feeling a little bit stretched, but you're not feeling stressed out. So I think it's about igniting a spark. So that's where, like what I was saying to William, it's about thinking back to even earlier points in life. Something that maybe elicited joy. In fact, I just saw like Pam just wrote in the chat, like meditation can evoke a feeling of flow. Um, does anyone want to share something that maybe inspires flow for them? Because maybe it's something that you wouldn't expect. I don't see anyone jumping up just yet, so we can, oh, William, go ahead.
Hi. again, years ago, I used to do, well, I do from time to time a TV program about health and things of that type. When I first started, and it was a half an hour long and it was real time, it was the fastest half an hour that I've ever spent. It looked like I just started, and then we're queuing, the host and the camera people, and on and on and on. And I thought, are we done? But the reason why that happened is because I loved it. It's something that I embrace, something that I've always been thinking about, and then finally there, and I loved all that happened with it, not just the fact of that we're doing a TV program. So it kind of brings it back to the fact that what you love, embrace yourself and practice that. As Lindsay just said, it starts here. And when you have that good feeling, you can project that, and you can project that to others. So, I thought I would just add that in.
That's such a beautiful example of being in that state of flow because it's so true. All of a sudden, you go from like, you have 30 minutes, get ready, and you blink and it's over. Right? And it's like, it's such a rewarding feeling. And it's so meaningful. And really, it's the more you can optimize that in your life, find the activities. And that's why I say, like, reference back to what you liked when you were young, right? Playing the horn. How cool was that? Like, who would have thought you'd revisit it at a later phase in life? And yet now it really is giving that feeling of like a vibrant experience. I also just want to speak a little bit about how flow connects to this idea of self-compassion. Both are about feeling good and engaging fully. And honestly, like this might be one of my favorite parts about this talk because I think self-compassion is one of the most underrated tools that we have. And basically, if you've heard of it or you want to know about it, it was developed by Kristen Neff, and she's done some amazing work in this area. And she describes it as being warm and understanding towards yourself when you're suffering or feeling inadequate, rather than beating yourself up with criticism. And, you know, all of us have probably spent time criticizing ourselves, probably more time than we spend comforting ourselves. Um, it's like, think about it. Maybe when was the last time you talked to your best friend who is having a bad day in the way that you might talk to yourself, that you are having a hard time? Quite honestly, if you use that same type of harshness, they might not want to be friends for all that long. Um, if any of you guys have ever just like replayed a conversation or an experience or really perseverated on how it sounded or how you could have spoke differently, then you really might benefit from interrupting some of these spirals or some of these cycles with self-compassion. And I certainly don't want to minimize the experience because that's not what self-compassion is about. But it's really about this internal critical voice that isn't serving you, right? And it's fair to say too, I mean, sometimes it's not just an internal voice, like maybe the world is sending the message, that they're uncomfortable or that they need to change. Um, but basically, I think what self-compassion can do is it can be the tool to say, hey, I'm having a really hard time. And I always like this. I think it's cool to study like the origin of some words. And the word compassion actually comes from Latin to mean to suffer with. And that's where self-compassion is just to suffer with yourself, to observe that you're having a hard time, to notice that you're struggling, and then respond with care and kindness, just like you would do anybody else that you love. So the first part of self-compassion is truly just changing the language that you're using when you talk to yourself. As I was saying, like the way that you would talk to a friend who is having a bad day, or like there's this funny metaphor, not funny, but like the way if you had a screaming baby in your arms at 3 o'clock in the morning, and like maybe you would love to scream at it, but that's not going to get your little baby to stop crying. You have to be tender. You have to be gentle. You have to let yourself calm down a little bit. The second piece of self-compassion is about common humanity. And this is the reminder that everybody struggles. To struggle is to be human. There are moments that don't go the way that we planned, where our body is responding with tension and anxiety. We might feel self-conscious or feel judged. And that's part of being human. That is okay. And I think when we disavow that piece, we tend to feel a lot more isolated. We feel almost alienated from the people around us. That can really amplify the struggle. So it's not that something is wrong with you. It means that you're human and it's okay to be having a hard time. The third piece of self-compassion is mindfulness. And I am going to dive into this a little bit more, but this is really truly immersing yourself in the present moment without judgment. And that's when we were talking about the relaxation breathing piece. It's not about pushing away the thoughts, right? Like it's not fighting them. It's allowing them to be there without judgment. Maybe it's anger, maybe it's frustration or shame, but instead of fighting it, to just notice it, to ask yourself, like, what's happening right now? And it really requires no extra effort beyond that. But I want to say that the research supports that when you can act from a more self-compassionate perspective, you will lower your anxiety. It reduces depression, it increases resilience, and it really will help you handle a lot of life's setbacks. So, whether it is something stuttering related, you're having an overwhelming block, whether it was a missed job opportunity or date that went sideways, if you can come back to yourself from a more self-compassionate perspective, you will be more willing to be vulnerable. You'll be willing to take more risks. Pam, it looks like you have a hand raised. Sorry.
Oh, no, I just raised it. I just wanted to share a quick example of how I try to apply self-compassion. I know for myself in the past, many times I would comment, "Oh my God, I just stuttered so horribly," or, "Oh, I've had just such a bad stuttering day." And one of the things that I have found, because you mentioned framing, is that when I turn that around and say to myself or say out loud to another person, wow, I stuttered really well there, and with a smile, because I stutter and I'm gonna stutter. So, so instead of like beating myself up for, stuttering, I kind of just turn that around and, wow, I stuttered really well there. And when I react like that with a smile, other people tend to react in kind. And I think that for me, that was a really helpful, self-compassionate realization that I came to. And people tell me that I'm crazy when I suggest that they say, you stuttered really well, but it helps to reframe that really well.
I love that. It's the idea of cognitive restructuring. It allows you to, feel a sense of confidence and like it's saying that I did do it well, right? Like that's the truth. It's not if you ignore that it happened, like that's not going to make it happen. What already happened not happen, right? So I think it is being able to just allow for a little bit of that space. It's being able to say, like, I can treat myself with kindness, finding the common humanity. Everybody struggles. And then just being able to kind of put yourself back into your body a little bit more. And I think I just want to speak a little bit of how like self-compassion can really not only create greater community, as you were just saying, Pam, like maybe the person you were talking to, like now you have this new connection with them because there's something really beautiful about self-connection. It's not, or sorry, self-compassion is that it doesn't just help you, it can actually transform relationships with the people around you because the way people struggle feels really unique to them and it can be really isolating and it can be really lonely, but it's really relatable because everybody's going through something. And here's what's really amazing. The more gentle and patient you are with yourself, the less you'll feel constantly pulled to seek other people's approval or validation. And that shift then ripples through the relationships. There's a really cool study about self-compassion and friendship. And I think it's really striking because basically it concludes that people who practice self-compassion are more emotionally connected and more supportive and more accepting, not only of themselves, but of the other people that are around them. So then in their relationships, they're less controlling and they don't feel as aggressive, or they don't feel as intruded upon. So when you think about that for a second, it's pretty cool that when you're actually kinder to yourself, that you naturally become kinder and more accepting to the people around you. And that is the groundwork for healthy and secure attachments. So self-compassion isn't just about feeling better when you're alone. It's about creating deeper and richer and more resilient relationships. So, in a world where we're experiencing so much loneliness right now, and this loneliness epidemic is pervasive, this ripple can be really transformative. I'm wondering if anybody else wants to share an example of when maybe they've been self-compassionate towards themselves or experienced someone else doing it and then were able to respond a little bit more gently.
I see Annabelle has her hand raised.
Yes. So like when you were talking about self-compassion, I just remembered so like a situation in which I was talking to my aunt, and like I was talking to her, but like I wasn't stuttering as much, and she told me, "Oh my God, you're not stuttering as much. You're doing so well." And like so in previous times I would say thank you, but then I would be harsh on myself. So then be, because then it's like I would think that I only get complimented, or like people only want to continue talking to me when I'm not stuttering as much. So like instead, during that conversation, I told her, hi, um as people who stutter, we don't really like when people say that, because when I talk I stutter. So like you're basically telling me or like other people that it's only when we talk fluently that our voices matter. So like in a way I provided self-compassion to myself by like showing up for me and not just shutting down and just be like, yay, thank you, and just, you know, like self ruminate and just have those intrusive thoughts and this and that. But then just by explaining it to her, she said, "Oh my God, I never knew that. Thank you so much for telling me." And that way, in a way, I also gave self compassion to her, because it's like I didn't just think that she should know that she shouldn't say that to me if no one has ever told her that this is not the correct way to have a conversation, or like compliment someone who stutters. And I'm like, you can say that I'm stuttering I'm stuttering really well, you enjoy hearing me stutter, just positive things regarding my stutter. And she's like, "Oh my God, thank you so much for telling me." And just because of that little conversation, I was able to just continue to speak to her for like over 2 hours, and she was just very engaged, listen. So it's just to say that sometimes we also have to give self-compassion to others, because they may not know that what they say may not be good for us mentally, but if we don't say it, no one will ever know.
You're so brave, and that's so courageous. Thank you for sharing. I think it speaks to so many different levels. First of all, I loved hearing you say where you showed up for yourself, because that's exactly what was happening there. Had you really just accepted what she said and maybe suppressed how you're actually feeling, and then that starts a breeding ground and maybe resentment. I'm making some assumptions here, but it would have been really emotionally uncomfortable, maybe even causing a rift between you and someone who you love. And when you were actually able to name it and bring it into the conversation, it demonstrated a sense of trust that like your relationship could definitely handle if it turned into a rupture, right? And it didn't. It didn't. It actually brought you guys so much closer together. It sounds like I would maybe say I don't know the relationship, but maybe it was like groundbreaking. Like that really, I mean, that's such a beautiful example. Thank you, Annabelle, for
Yes,
sharing.
I would say that it just showed me that I don't have to always be the victim. So like I always think I'm the victim because I'm a person who stutters, and like I ask them to wait for me and this and that. But just doing that and just her continuing to listen, asking me questions, giving me time, it just showed me that my mind is my worst enemy. So just to continue to speak out. I can also be gentle, but still be respectful and kind and get my point across.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Max, uh, it looks like
Yeah.
you have your hand
Yeah.
raised. Hi.
Um, Hi. So I have a hard time accepting the way that just how I talk, and something that has helped me is that I sometimes laugh when I'm saying a word that I have a hard time with. And I feel like that just shows the other person um that I'm having a conversation with, just that it's just kind of light and e- light and easy, and it's just a good way of just accepting that the way that I talk, I can't change it. Although if I had to say a word, and if I were to say it in a serious in a serious way, or just like be happy and laugh through the word, it reflects a happier and just accepting environment. And I realized that that has helped me a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's such a beautiful example of self-compassion because, even when Pam was saying a little bit about how like you get to reframe it, and it gives you agency not only in terms of how you respond to what's happening around you, but once again, it's feeling like, okay, this can actually be a point of connection with somebody that I'm talking to. Um, Thank you so much for sharing that. Did anyone else want to jump in? I love these examples because I think they're so unifying. It's so connecting. It's also so good to hear.
Yeah, I can share. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Um, so in my job, I often have to call um, call people. So like whether that be a parent of a child, um, I I I have to just make calls, and so as most people on here, it's just not my favorite thing. And I think for a while, um, I throughout my life, especially when I was younger, I just would get really anxious and just avoid completely. But I think even with this job that I'm currently in, how I knew that I had grown was that I was just open to just hear, okay, how often, would I have to call, or these people, what's the pace, or like, do I have to do how many, or just, you know, uh, those certain questions that I knew would kind of um, uh, build on, whether I would feel more anxious. I guess in that role, but um, but anyways, with how I plan my week, I try to not put pressure on myself to have to make so many calls like in a day. Um, I mean, like I've already talked to my 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 boss about this and asked my questions, and she said, if you want to make like one an hour, like you can take your time, uh, and knowing, hearing that from her helped, of course, but um, I think knowing that one, I can do hard things, and I do hard things each day, and every week. That brings a lot of ease, and I think peace of knowing that I had that in me, and even on those days when I can only do two, I can only do two calls, like that's okay. I can I can try again in a few days, or I can try again next week. Um, it's not about how I sound. It's, hey, I'm trying to share this information with this person, and as long as they're open to hear, and they ask questions if they did not understand, then it's okay, most of the time. So yeah, I can see how this is so helpful, especially when we have those hard things that we kind of have to ease our way up to do and to plan for. Um, it just can feel, I think, more overwhelming knowing that it's coming if there's not that self-compassion in there to say, like, okay, how much can I do, today? How much am I able to do, in 2 hours? Or, if not, then it's okay. Like, so yeah, I think this is an important um, an important thing to share for sure. So thank you.
No, Samantha, you're amazing. And thank you so much for sharing that, because you tapped into so many different themes that really resonated as you were speaking. One, I think you're speaking to also this idea of like attunement, right? Like understanding yourself, like where are you at effectively on a given day? Like if you're having a tough day, okay, I'm not going to push myself to do something that ultimately I'm not setting myself up for success. And then on like this wonderful day where you're flourishing and feeling good, great, do 4 calls then. But it's really important to have a sense of like, where's the emotional baseline? There's this like quote where it's like, or it's just this like pithy aphorism, but it's like, when you feel better, you can feel better. Meaning like when you can actually feel your feelings, then you can respond in a way that like helps you feel more stable, more comfortable. And so I love that you were able to recognize, like, okay, what is my expectation? How can I manage that over an appropriate amount of time? And then this illustration of like, you can do hard things. And for all of us here, it's like we can all do hard things. We'll do hard things on every day, but some of those accomplishments almost like fade into the background, or we tend to like diminish it or just like reduce ourselves because of like an external metric. And the truth is, it's like, no, these are the successes. These are the wins on a daily basis, and we have to just register. I love to, and that's why I love this part of this presentation where it's like you guys get to like wave your accomplishments in the air and like celebrate, and we can all celebrate each other together because it's so important. And just this one last point where it's like success begets success, emotionally. It's like the more you can take risks, the more you can be vulnerable, the more you can be successful in just being with your feelings, the more you can continue to do it. And what used to be your comfort zone, that you kept pushing yourself outside and you kept going a little bit further and you kept progressing, all of a sudden, wow, you've traversed a lot of terrain, and all of a sudden you're in a completely new space. So that was great. Thank you so much. Um, did anyone else want to share? We can jump forward, just about a couple more ways to really cultivate self-compassion. Um, Christopher Germer, who's a Harvard psychologist, he came up with these 5 areas that are really helpful to just focus on when you're looking to really develop your self-compassion. It's physical, mental, emotional, relational, and spiritual. And I can speak to it kind of quickly. But basically, the first, when we're talking about physical and you're aware of what is your physiological response, sometimes even just holding your own hand, being able to put your hands on your chest and do what is called tapping, where you are essentially giving yourself a reverse hug, but you are actually being able to interact with your physical being. And the technique is noticing where you're holding the tension and being able to attend to yourself. Um, Next, also just focusing on the mental. This is really challenging and neutralizing that harsh inner critic. So it's really being able to separate the facts from the feelings. So instead of just saying like, I totally had a huge block and just blew the presentation, the fact of the matter is, yeah, I stuttered a lot during the presentation. I stuttered really well during the presentation, and it brought up this feeling for me, as opposed to being personalizing it as what was happening. Um, the next one is really the emotional piece. And this is where I was talking before about treating yourself like you would treat a loved and cherished friend. So, really asking yourself, like, what do I need in this situation? How can I take care of myself? And the next one is just the relational piece. This is where we are talking about connecting with someone, where Annabelle was telling us about connecting with her aunt and just being able to speak to other people. And the more conversation we can have, and the more we can express our authentic self in a way that feels safe, it really allows you to continue to flourish. And the last piece comes back to the spirituality, really mindfulness. It's connecting to something greater. So it's about being present with your feelings instead of trying to just fix it or talk yourself out of it. Like if you notice that something is coming up for you, acknowledging it, being able to name it. Without jumping to solutions, because I think we live in this society where, like, if we see someone else being uncomfortable, we either avoid it or suppress it. And we don't always need to do that. I think there's plenty of room to be able to just hold the emotions and exist with it. And that becomes a skill. That's the more we can do, we can almost desensitize ourselves to some like the overwhelming or unhelpful responses. So these are 5 practices that are kind of helpful, and we can come back to it. I know I wanted to leave a little bit of time, really just to open up the conversation. So I guess really the last piece that I just really want to hit on today is this idea of mindfulness, because we've talked a lot about it, but I really just want to give it a little bit of focus before we pause for just a greater discussion. Because I couldn't do a presentation talking about positive psychology if we didn't name mindfulness. And really, it's like what we did with the relaxation breathing. It is anchoring yourself in the present moment while suspending the judgment. If your mind is bouncing all over the place, that is okay, right? Like we live in this notification world where our attention is the commodity and everybody is grabbing for it all the time. So we're pretty conditioned at this point to just feel reactive to these pings of life. And the problem is, it doesn't just make us distracted, it can also make you feel anxious or overwhelmed or take you away from the focus that you're trying to put your attention towards. So, the way that we interrupt that cycle is this mindfulness technique, right? So, whether it is relaxation breathing, whether it's a progressive muscle relaxation, which is where you go through each different muscle group in your body, start by clenching the muscle for 5 seconds and then releasing it. And then moving up. And basically, what you're doing is you're interrupting the cerebral feedback loop, right? Like you're interrupting the thought that then goes into the behavior, that then goes into the emotion. And when you have some of these tools in your toolbox, and I know I'm kind of racing through this last one because I want to give us plenty of time to speak, but basically, throughout all of this, the goal is to be able to allow your true feelings to exist. When you can act in accordance with your authentic self, suddenly you feel like you have a lot more agency over your emotion and you can really evoke a lot more experiences for happiness. Um, I do want to pause here because I want to leave a little bit of room just to talk a little bit more, because that is my favorite part of these presentations, is getting to hear from you guys. Maybe if something really resonated, if anybody had a reaction or a thought, um, I'm curious if anyone feels comfortable sharing. Yes, William.
I just want to talk about how the news is portraying everything that's horrible. And it kind of puts people into almost a helpless mood. Realize that the TV stations, and I know a lot about this, will advertise something because people gravitate towards the negative a lot. When negative things happen, realize that throughout the world there are hundreds of things that are so positive. And if we can gravitate towards that, we do need a little bit of news. We do need, to know what's happening, but realize good things are happening. And let's not just get hung up with that, you know, and it's hard not to do because there's so much advertising. By the way, the ratings are how, as you know, a TV station makes their money. And so when it's horrible, this crash, that crash, the bridges are down, blah, 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 then people, call each other, hey, this happened. But when something is good, like this person just got a promotion or a scholarship, on, we can celebrate that just as much.
Mhm. I so appreciate you sharing that because I think you're spot on. Like, these are really heavy times right now, and it's really easy to feel consumed by it. And you're right, not only with like the television news, which is this endless cycle, but we get it through all of these methods. The second you pick up your phone, it's, social media or the news apps, it's all consuming. And that's where I think like not only being able to absorb a lot more of like each of these interventions, whether it is about building connection, whether it's these roots to happiness, which is just like being able to find the goodness in life, being able to engage fully with the things that elicit joy for you, and being able, the third one is really about, connecting beyond the self, service beyond the self, eliciting a feeling of connection, because when we're able to come together as a community, it's how we navigate these really hard times.
We have Judith with a question, and I apologize, Judith, for not seeing your hand raised sooner.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi,
Okay.
Judith.
Hi, I'm going to go back and talk about stuttering and self-compassion. As I'm sitting here listening to this, and I really appreciate the information, I'm thinking that advertising your stuttering and using voluntary stuttering is a form of self-compassion. Think about it, because you're certainly reducing your stress level. And if anything has given me fluency in my life after years of, I'm here in Tucson where fluency shaping was famous. I'm from the Midwest where Van Riper therapy was famous. If if anything has given me fluency in my life, it has been when I have used voluntary stuttering, and I have advertised my stuttering to everybody. So kind of keep that in mind as being a form of self-compassion.
That's beautiful, Judith. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm wondering too, is there an example or a time that you can share when you were able to use voluntary stuttering and being able to um, just an experience that you had?
Oh,
If a
I just
specific
used,
one comes.
right. I got involved with the NSA in the 1990s, and that was my exposure to meeting all these people who stuttered. And I just heard them talk and stutter and talk and be very successful. So along the way, I just started to used voluntary stuttering, and I started to advertise to everybody that I stuttered. And it really has made a difference. It has given me fluency, but I still enjoy telling people that I stutter. I I tell them all the time. I tell all kinds of people that I stutter. And then I have to remember to add voluntary stuttering so I don't have too much fluency. So, I mean, it's just been so successful for me. And as I'm sitting here, um, listening to your information, it certainly is self-compassion.
It truly is. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's what I love. It's like the individual stories that weaves us all together. So thank you so much for sharing that. Max, it looks like I'm seeing your hand raised. Do you want to share?
Yeah. Um, I actually had a question for Judith. Um, it was when you advertised your stutter, is it to get rid of the anxiety from yourself, um, or to just let the other person know that you stutter to kind of get rid of any I guess surprises that they could have when you have a hard time saying a word?
Max, it's probably both, but I
Yeah.
think it started out for me serving myself because I realized when I used all this voluntary stuttering that I got a lot more fluency.
Yeah,
And
I
and
bet. That's
and
awesome.
and so and so when I advertise to other people, I'm not only advertising my stuttering to make them more comfortable, I'm also into educating about stuttering.
Yeah.
So I've got half of Arizona educated about stuttering.
I love it. That's so cool. That's
I'm a
incredible.
transplant here. I'm out of the Midwest.
That's great. I love it.
They're lucky to have you, Judith. It looks like Annabelle.
Yes,
Sorry, it's like
you're
yeah,
good.
it's
So I wanted to give more information to what Judith said about voluntarily stuttering. I will absolutely agree that it is a form of self-compassion because I myself do it too. And for me, in a way, it's like choosing to finally stutter. So like I choose how much I stutter. I choose how long the stuttering is. I, in a way, am playing with my stutter. So it's like not something to fear. So like in my current speech therapy services, I'm just learning um, in a way to learn about the actual stutter and like my experiences and not about the strategies. So like for me, I think a lot of just my traumatic experience, my anxieties, everything was just due to not wanting to know more about stuttering than what was already happening to me. So like just by being willing to do my hardest block moments, just choosing to do it voluntarily, it didn't seem as scary as when it just happens and then I have no control over it. So I think it's a form of self-compassion in which, in a way, you take your power back, um, you become a little bit more kind to yourself regarding voluntarily stuttering, because I guess for me, it was really hard to learn voluntarily stuttering, because it's like my brain could understand why I was choosing to stutter on words that I'm usually fluent on. But by just changing that mindset, it just has opened my eyes to like, ooh, how hard can I go? How much can I do it? So like I'm no longer afraid of the actual sound or words. Now I will challenge myself to do the biggest vlogs, because it's like it's no longer the scary person. It's just there, and I play with it, I change it up. And that way it's self-compassion, in which you're just allowing yourself to be kind, and like changing your, I guess, your way of thinking into like, maybe it's not that you're not trying to stutter, it could just be that you're not trying to struggle stuttering. So like those can be a good way to try self-compassion in that way. That's just been my experience, and it has been amazing for me.
Yeah. First of all, thank you again. I love your perspective, and I love the way you're able to like, articulate it in a way where it's so relatable. One thing that really stood out is also this idea of like voluntary versus involuntary. And I think you're spot on that it's like when there is a feeling of greater control, suddenly the intrusion feels less dysregulating.
Yeah, so isn't there a psychological concept where there's the total self, which is who I am, then there is the self-image of who I think I am. So if those who circles are completely separate, it's a huge problem, right? So what you want is to have those circles interconnecting. So, and I think with people who stutter, they have often these two circles: is they like to talk, but they hate to stutter. So when you do the fake stuttering and the self-disclosure and all those other things, those two circles come together. So it's a lot healthier. So I think those concepts from psychology and the issue of stuttering sort of come all together.
That's beautiful. And because it's speaking to an integration of the identity.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. So
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Max.
And I just had one more thing. Is that how you would say that you, I guess, just accept that that is who you are? Just because I would say right now that the problem that I have is I am just having a hard time accepting the way that this is how I talk. So what I'm kind of getting from this is, if I just put myself in uncomfortable situations, that hopefully by the end that I'll just get so comfortable with the way that I talk. I guess my question is, how do you guys come to the realization that this is how it is?
Well, I can jump in there and just share. It is not an overnight process. You know, I think that's like the thing that we can be most passionate about. I have stuttered for over 50 years, you know, and I was covert for 35 of those years. I hid it because I was so afraid of rejection, essent, essentially, which is, you know, like that is like, I think the epitome of, you know, human connection. We want to be accepted and we want to feel like we belong. And I think one of the reasons why people struggle with stuttering is that we're afraid that we're not going to be accepted. So I think self-acceptance does indeed go such a long way towards that, but you have to give yourself grace. It takes a while. It's certainly not something that is gonna happen overnight. And I think the tips and the tools that Lindsay has offered us, you know, specifically can help with the anxiety of stuttering, but in general, just can help with, you know, everyday anxiety that we may have. And we know it's been said here before, this has been a very stressful time that we're living in. And sometimes it's easy for us to fall into that, oh my gosh, I have to deal with stuttering on top of that. So give yourself grace and recognize that it may take a while, but as you feel better about stuttering, you might find that it's easier to be able to share that with others. Judith, and then we'll head back over to Lindsay to start.
Well, I think
winding down.
Sam has up his hand before I put mine up. So could we go to Sam first?
Of course, Sam.
Yeah, I can jump in, but Judith, if you're going to respond to Max's comment, you're welcome to go ahead.
I'm sorry, was that directed to me, Sam?
Yeah. I don't know if you were gonna have something separate, or you wanted to talk to what Max.
Oh, I was going to make kind of I was even going to go back for further than Pam. I think I think this also addresses Max too a little bit. Always remember, it's not your fault that you stutter. We are genetically a little bit different. This started coming out years ago in the Midwest at the University of Illinois, where they discovered genes and chromosomes of people who stutter. We are a little bit neurologically different. Our brain, when they look at our brain matter, we have different kinds of white and gray matter. So always keep that in mind. It's not your fault that you stutter. And it's especially important for parents because they often feel very guilty that my child stutters. So keep that in mind. It's not your fault that you stutter. If you don't like it, but it's not your fault. The end.
And thank you, Judith. Sam, did you want to also make a
Thank
comment?
you. I just wanted to thank you, Lindsay, for bringing these topics kind of front and center. And I think it's so important to talk about the relationship between stuttering and mental health. I can only speak for myself, but I'm sure I'm not the only one. For me, stuttering has a very, very profound effect on my mental health, and the two are very closely intertwined. And I feel like there just isn't always or at least I haven't always had the space to talk about that, even being connected with the NSA for a long time. And I wonder if some reason is, this obviously has been like this kind of long-standing misnomer that people stutter because they're anxious or nervous or stressed or whatever, and that we've almost maybe course corrected too far in the opposite direction, where we don't talk about mental health. We want to kind of totally dissociate ourselves with that. So I just think it's so important to make time and space to talk about these kind of things, and I just appreciate you broaching the conversation, and I hope that can continue. So thank you.
Absolutely. That means a lot. And I'm so appreciative that you guys all took this time out of your nights to come here, to be vulnerable, to share. I mean, truly, that's what community is. And even as we're talking about, these are really dark and heavy times, and people just systemically are feeling lonely and disconnected. And yet we came together to like have this special experience tonight. So thank you guys for making this happen, for bringing it to life. I think these are really important universal topics. And of course, everyone, has their own connection to it. Um, I'd love to continue this conversation and keep it going. Um, I also wanted to share my info in case anyone wanted to be in touch. But we can certainly keep this intersection between stuttering and mental health, um, and really creating lives that we want to be in. Because this is the one that we got.
Forgot to unmute myself. Thank you, Lindsay, so much for joining us tonight and putting the time and the effort that you did into making this great presentation. Certainly, we've learned a lot from your experience, and importantly as well, we've learned a lot from each other. So it's really wonderful when people in an NSA Connect session actually do connect and share with each other. So um, thank you all very much for joining us tonight. Lindsay, we did have a question in the chat, wondering if the slides will be available.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Can we make the slide deck available to folks?
Definitely. And you and I can chat offline about that, but
Yes.
I'm happy to get that over to you.
All right, great. Well, thank you all very much for joining us, and stay tuned for February 2026. We have a lot of other wonderful NSA Connect sessions coming up for next month as well. So again, thank you all, and have a great evening.